天天 Anderson say 的仆 get over here this instant.
Hello, I'm Trevor.
I'm Susu.
Together, we're exploring the differences between the United States and China.
As you can imagine, there are many.
One of those differences is the topic of today's video.
Names. Let's roll the intro.
As you can imagine, due to the vast linguistic and cultural gap, names in the United States and China work very differently and come from very different places. In this video, we'll be taking a deep dive into those differences. In the process, we'll be making some generalizations about names in each country, which, while true for the statistical majority in each country, that is to say, Han Chinese and Americans who follow the English naming system, it does not take into account the sheer diversity that exists in both countries. Now is a good time to note that China also prides itself on having a very diverse country, with over 56 ethnic groups, which you can see pictured here in this elementary school textbook under the banner 我是中国人, I am Chinese. Now, some of these groups have very different naming conventions to the Han majority, and so are slightly beyond the scope of this video. I will still try to address a few relevant exceptions or interesting tidbits, but please forgive me if I can't get to all of them. Let's start with the most basic structure of names. In the United States, the majority of people have three names: a first name, a middle name, and a last name, appearing in that order on your birth certificate. There is no cultural standard on how long or short a name might be. The average length of an American given name is about 6.5 characters, which equates to usually 2 syllables, and the average length of a surname is 7 characters, which usually equates to also 2 syllables. But without any limits, names could range from the 2-syllable Kai Law to the eccentric, very long name of Hubert Blaine Wolfus Egelstein Hausenbergerdorf Sr., whose name is so long, in fact, that I've truncated it here by well over half. In fact, it holds the Guinness World Record for the longest name ever at 747 English letters. For those interested, pause here so you can read it. By contrast, Han Chinese names will lead with the family name first and then the given name, with no middle names to be found. Almost all modern family names are 1 character long, with 1 Chinese character equal to 1 syllable, and given names are typically 2 characters long, although they can also be 1 character long. The National Citizen Identity Information Service states that over 85% of Han Chinese individuals have 2-character given names, whereas only a little over 14% have single-character given names. You'll notice that these numbers added together don't quite come up to 100%. That is because it is possible to have a slightly longer name, even following traditional naming standards. In fact, it's law in China that Han citizens can have names of up to 6 characters in length, something that can cause a bit of a problem if you're in a Han majority area and you have a longer name than that. For example, when I was teaching English in China, I was teaching in a very small city, and a local bank wouldn't let me open an account using my English name as it easily surpassed the 6-character limit. Unfortunately, they also didn't have an option for filling in foreign names, so I just had to accept my salary in cash from then on. Now you might be asking yourself, Trevor, how does someone arrive at a name that's more than 3 characters long if family names are only 1 character and given names are only 2 characters? Well, there are some possible ways in which you could achieve this. One is if you have the rare 2-character surnames, known as fuxing. Nowadays, these are extremely rare. In fact, the only example that I can think of is a fictional character in a movie. The other possible way is if your parents both give you their surnames. So you could be something like Li Zhang Zixin, with Li and Zhang each being your parents' surnames. Though I have never heard of this happening, the way you could get up to 6 characters, still using traditional methods, is by both of your parents having a different fuxing and still giving you a 2-character name. Given the rarity of fuxing, I have never heard of this actually happening, but there is potential. That said, it is very rare in China for both parents to give their surnames to their children, and so it is unlikely that you'll hear about a case like that anytime soon. Now, some famous historical figures who had fuxing are Sima Qian, a historian from the Western Han Dynasty, and Zhuge Liang, a politician and military strategist from the Three Kingdoms period. You'll notice that both of them have a fuxing, but a single-character name, keeping their names at 3 characters. In modern China, people will address only their friends and family by their given name alone. Acquaintances will usually opt for the 3-character option. If your name only has 2 characters, oftentimes your friends and family as well will call you by your full name, or just give you a nickname. More on nicknames in Chinese later. But Trevor, you might ask, what do I do if I have a foreign name in Chinese? Like your name was way too long for your bank, what do you do in that case? How would a news story write about me? Well, first of all, Greg, no one's going to be writing a news story about you, except maybe as the most annoying neighbor. But the way that you express a foreign name in Mandarin is by keeping the original order of the name, but expressing it in Chinese characters. Take a look at JFK's name right here. You'll notice the dots in between the characters indicate different parts of his name, so first, middle, and last. One interesting thing is when converting Japanese names into Mandarin, you can often just take the characters and read them with the Mandarin pronunciation, resulting in the same look as the original Japanese name, but wildly different pronunciations. For example, Shohei Ohtani's name in Japanese is Otani Shohei, but in Mandarin we would read it as Da Gu Xiangping. One small thing I noticed in English is we tend to keep Chinese names in the native order. For example, the actress Fan Bingbing is Fan Bingbing in English and in Mandarin, but if an actor takes on an English name, like Jackie Chan, we then put it in the English order. That said, for Japanese names, which follow the same order as Chinese names in the native Japanese, we tend to switch the first and surnames in order to match the English order. So the baseball player I mentioned earlier, Otani Shohei, is Shohei Ohtani in English. It seems like this is just the convention in converting Japanese names into English. Someone with better knowledge of Japanese, correct me if I'm wrong. But where, you might be asking, do your names come from? Well, like in the US, most Chinese children will get their surnames from their fathers, but given names are often a little bit more complicated. If you're an American like me, the story behind your given name is probably pretty straightforward. Most Americans will choose their children's names based on aesthetic reasons, maybe to honor a friend or a relative, or maybe they heard a name on Game of Thrones and they decided that's a great name for their child. Sorry to all the Khaleesi's out there. People in the United States usually don't put too much thought into the meaning behind the name. I know I, for one, didn't even know my name had a meaning beyond being a name until I was in elementary school. In China, the process of choosing a given name is a little bit more complicated. First of all, like in English, you want to have a name that sounds good. In Chinese, that often also means that you want the second character in your child's given name to have a flat or a rising tone. Then you have to pick characters with good or auspicious meanings. Oftentimes these meanings will convey your hopes for your child in the future. Because Chinese has a lot of characters with the same pronunciation, it's very important to choose characters that have good meanings. For example, if you were to give your child the name Jianhua, you would want to go with this Jian and not this Jian. You'd want to go with this Hua and not this Hua. If you choose wrong, your child could go through life being despicable and cunning or slippery, as opposed to being the builder of China. Definitely not a mistake that school children would let go unpunished. Some families will even go a step further and employ a fortune teller to help them pick out a name. Traditionally, depending on the year, the month, the day, or even the time of day when you're born, you possess different amounts of the 5 traditional elements: metal, water, wood, fire, and earth. The fortune teller takes your time of birth and calculates what elements you might be missing, and maybe provides some suggestions on what names you should give your child. If a fortune teller determines that you might be missing a particular element, for example wood, you might change your character from Hua to Hua, like this. You'll notice Hua over here has wood in the name, so that makes up for your deficiencies. The idea is by adding this element into your name, this will balance out your personality and hopefully give you a better future. We even know some people who visited fortune tellers as adults and got a name change based on their recommendations. Alright, I brought Susu in to tell us a little bit about her name. So Susu, how did your parents choose your name?
I think my parents choose my name based on multiple levels. First of all, they want to have a good meaning. So Susu in Chinese means earnest, pure, dignity, and elegance. Those are the qualities they hope I have. On top of that, they really hope my first name rhyme with my last name. As you know, my last name is not really common in Chinese, which is Pu. In the end, it's my grandparents from my mom's side decided my name.
And so they decided they wanted it to rhyme just because they liked how it sounded?
Yeah.
Did you ever have a fortune teller tell you anything about your name, or?
I think that was common at the time, but we didn't. I think a lot of people, they would go not only the fortune teller, or they will go to an agency that they have this database that can help you choose the names and then with good meaning and all that.
And of course, children are not the only things you give names to. You will also name your pets. The conventions around naming your pets in China are also a bit different from in the United States. While in the United States it's common for pets to carry a less popular human name as their name, in China, some pet naming conventions include naming them for the color of their fur, for example, xiaobai, or naming them for a type of food, such as xigua or naicha. One of the more interesting suggestions I found online when I was researching this video was daoge, which is just the Chinese pronunciation of the English word dog. But enough about given names. How do you get your surname? Well, In China, the history of surnames goes back a lot longer than in English. In English, surnames have a very short history. Back in the day, people didn't travel as much, and so the odds that you'd run into another Trevor were very low. That changed in the 11th century around the time of the Norman invasion, when the population of England grew exponentially, and it suddenly became necessary to differentiate the different Johns you met on the street. And so, the English began adopting surnames en masse. Most surnames were descriptive in some way. For example, they might be describing the person's occupation, such as Smith or Cooper. They might be describing a trait of the person, such as Armstrong, or they might be describing where the person came from, like York, Dale, or Ford. The history of Chinese surnames goes back just a little bit further, 5,000 or 6,000 years. At that time, surnames were mostly derived from the name of a tribe or tribal leaders, and at the time, Chinese society was matriarchal, so all of these surnames were matrilineal, meaning passed from the mother to the child. You can still see this influence in the modern character for surname Xing, which is formed by combining nü and sheng. You can also see this in some historically powerful surnames, such as Jiang, Yao, Ying, etc., all of which carry the radical nü for woman. Fun fact, the basketball player Yao Ming bears one of these surnames, Yao. That's not to say, of course, that fathers had no influence at all. In fact, it was common in ancient China for people to have two surnames. They would have a Xiu, which came from the mother, and a Shi, which came from the father. These two words combined actually give us our modern noun for the word surname, Xing Shi. As in England at the time, surnames in ancient China were mostly reserved for the rich and powerful. Peasants didn't start to use surnames widely in China until around the 5th century during the Warring States period, still a good 1400 years before the Britons. Many common surnames have actually remained popular throughout the ages. During the Northern Song dynasty, there were people who collected surnames into a book which we call the Baijiaxing, or 100 Family Surnames. In it, it holds, you guessed it, 411 surnames originally, with a further 93 added, bringing the total to 504. According to researchers, the most popular surnames at the time were Wang, Li, and Zhang, in that order. This is data which the Chinese government still tracks today. In 2020, the most popular surnames were Wang, Li, and Zhang, still in the same order. Funny how some things never change. Alrighty, we've brought Susu back into the studio to answer some questions about your surname. Can you remind the audience, what is your surname?
Pu.
I have a quick quiz for you. I hope I haven't caught you by surprise. Do you know what Pu's ranking was in the original Baijiaxing?
I think it's around like 200 something.
Yep, that's right. It was 269. How about in the updated version? 177. So you're moving up in the world.
I always know my surname is rare because at school I can't really find the person with the same surname as mine.
Well, do you know where the highest concentration of people with the surname Pu is?
I think it's from the northeast of China because that's where my families are from.
What I saw online is actually 48% of the people with the surname Pu are living in Sichuan province.
That's wrong.
Let us know in the comments if you have better numbers, but that's what we found. Now, another fun fact about surnames in China is most women will not take their husband's surname when they get married, something that is still relatively common in the United States. At the same time, giving your child a combined surname is much rarer in China than it is to give your child a hyphenated name in the United States. One of my favorite facts about Chinese surnames is that, back in the day, the emperor might give you the national surname if you did a good enough deed. One of my favorite examples comes from the records of the Grand Historian by Sima Qian, in which he details the Emperor Shun giving a man called Bo Yi the national surname Ying as a reward for him being so good at taming beast and fowl. However, other records indicate that he got the surname for helping alleviate flooding. A much more worthy contribution in my opinion. However, with the Emperor Shun allegedly having lived over 4,000 years ago, and Sima Qian living in the Western Han period, his accounts should be taken with a grain of salt. That said, there are much more easily corroborated references to emperors giving people surnames in later times. In English, everyone has a title that they might go by in formal situations. Your average person might be a Mr. or a Mrs. Doctor would refer to someone who has a doctorate degree or someone who works as a medical doctor. And there are also many other titles based on jobs. For example, in the government, you have the president all the way down to the alderman, who would all be referred to by their titles. And in the military, you have people who are referred to by their rank, from general all the way down to private. Other commonly used titles in English include familial titles like aunt or uncle, as well as royal titles in the UK, like Queen or King. Regardless of the title, we always lead with the title and then add the person's name behind it. In most cases, we use the surname, such as Dr. Octopus. However, with familial names, we'll often use the person's first name. If you called your aunt Aunt Smith and you're in a family of Smiths, that is bound to cause some confusion. In Mandarin, you have all the same categories of titles as in English. However, the order, as in English, is reversed, where the surname will come first, followed by the title. So Dr. Li in English would become Li Yisheng in Mandarin. Another difference is that you have a lot more titles based on the jobs that someone does. For example, you wouldn't call your teacher Mr. Smith, you could call them Smith 老师. Same thing with lawyer, you would refer to your lawyer by their surname plus 律师. Not that you hopefully need one. Even in the corporate world, people are referred to by their position within the company. For example, your manager Sharon Cai might become Cai Jingli in Mandarin. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the large differences that also exist in familial titles. In Mandarin, you have different words for older and younger siblings, both brother and sister. You also have different words for your maternal and paternal grandparents, but nothing is quite as complicated as your different terms for your aunts and uncles. Excluding some regional differences, as things are already complicated enough, you'll have 5 terms for aunts and 5 terms for uncles. So let's start with uncles. If your dad has an older brother, that is your 伯伯. If your dad has a younger brother, that is a 叔叔. If your dad has a sister who's married to a man, that is your 姑父. On your mom's side, your mom's brother is your 舅舅, regardless if he's older or younger, and your mom's sister's husband is your 姨父, also regardless of how old he is. As for aunts, on your dad's side, your dad's sister is your 姑姑, your dad's older brother's wife is your 伯母, your dad's younger brother's wife is your 婶婶, your mom's sister is your 阿姨, and your mom's brother's wife is your 舅妈. As I'm sure you can imagine, that's pretty complicated, and so even Chinese children will need to be reminded what to call people at family gatherings. In China, however, these titles are not just familial. For children, any older adult might be referred to as 叔叔 or 阿姨, and any younger adult or older kid might be 哥哥 or 姐姐. If you're an adult, the general terms you'll use when addressing a stranger politely are 先生 for men, and for women, Susu, I need your help with something. Alright, thank you for joining me again. So, I have a question for you. How would you refer to a female stranger in Mandarin?
I think I would normally call them 小姐姐 or 美女. I think back in the days, maybe 美女 is more common. Then gradually they will feel like me referring to older women. So they don't really want to have that. Then people start calling 小姐姐.
So you wouldn't say 小姐 anymore.
That's very inappropriate.
But what about suffixes? In English, you might add a suffix to your name if you have the same name as one of your parents. You might also have a separate suffix if your children also bear the same name, and so on and so forth. That's how we get senior, junior, the third, etc. Now, while I think it's rare to run into someone with a suffix in their name, that might just be my perception based on only meeting 1 or 2 people with suffixes in their name. That, or some people might choose not to introduce a suffix when introducing themselves. In Mandarin, there is no tradition of naming your child after yourself, and so you'll not see any juniors or seniors walking around. However, there are translations for this in Mandarin, so if you are a junior or senior, you don't need to worry about that. But having that in your name will definitely mark you as being foreign. Now, there may come a time in your relationship with someone where you want to call them something other than their government name. Well, I have just the thing for you, a nickname. I'm being told I did not invent that has been something that's been around for ages. But oh well, I guess we'll look at how they work then. In English, nicknames are often a shortening of someone's given name. For example, you take Nicholas and you get Nick, you take Benjamin and you get Ben, you take Robert and you get Rob, you take William, you get Will. However, due to a historic trend of consonant swapping in nicknames, you get some nicknames that leave you scratching your head. For example, Robert became Rob and then got consonant swapped to Bob. William became Will and then got consonant swapped to Bill. You can then re-lengthen it by adding a diminutive E at the end. So Robert, Rob, Bob, Bobby. William, Will, Bill, Billy. Those are all the same name, just with different nicknames. Not confusing at all. Other common ways that nicknames are formed in English include describing a personal trait of someone. For example, someone with the nickname Red might be red-headed. Of course, sometimes these are also ironic, so it's just as likely that someone with the nickname Smalls is tiny as they are ginormous. Mandarin nicknames work a little bit differently. There's not much shortening to be had when you only have 3 syllables in your name to begin with, but oftentimes they will still be based on your actual name. For example, someone named Zimo could get the nickname Mozi, which is the name of a Chinese philosopher. Another way to play with someone's name is you can add a diminutive such as Xiao or A to their name. For example, former Taiwanese president Chen Shui-bian got the nickname A Bian. Conversely, people might form a nickname using Da or Lao plus a character from someone's name. Back when I was working at a summer camp and my Mandarin name still started with Chen, I was given the name Da Chen in order to differentiate myself from the other counselor whose name was Chen. Just like in English, some Mandarin nicknames might be based on someone's physical appearance. For example, in the rap group Wantong, you have 2 members, one called Shouzi and one called Pangzi, who both got their nicknames based on their physical appearance. For more information on why it's more acceptable to comment on people's weight in Chinese culture, you can click on the I right now, and it will take you to our video on good manners in China versus the United States. Please wait until after you finish this video to actually watch it though. Now, one thing I particularly like about Chinese nicknames is their penchant for giving Western celebrities very cute Chinese nicknames. Susu, I need you again! Alright, thank you for coming back yet again. I had another question for you. So you know how Chinese people will give nicknames to foreign celebrities? I wanted you to share a couple.
First of all, and the most important is for Taylor Swift. So in China, we will call them Mei Mei. The reference is coming from, I think, back in the day when she just debuted. There was a lot of time she was nominated for several awards, but then didn't get elected. So it was kind of like 倒霉, like unlucky.
Her nickname is Unlucky Unlucky.
Another one is for Timothy Chalamet. His nickname is Tian Cha. So like sweet tea. He also knows that from the Chinese audience. He will refer to that sometimes on his interview.
Finally, we've arrived at our bonus segment where I'm going to address 3 more things that couldn't fill out a whole segment on their own in the main video, but I think are very interesting to go over anyway. The first of these is how, in the past in China, you could accumulate many names over the course of your lifetime. When you were born, you'll be given a milk name, and then later in life you might accumulate other names such as a courtesy name, a school name, an art name, in addition to your official name. Just take a look at Sun Yat-sen, the founder of modern China's Wikipedia entry, see how many names he has and from what different sources. Next, because most surnames in Mandarin have common meanings beyond just being a surname. For example, Wang means king and Li means plum. While most names carry very normal meanings, there are some small groups that carry very strange names. From least unusual to most unusual, some of the names I found were Lao being old, Nan being disaster, Si being death, and the last one, Shi being Talk about getting the end of the stick. Lastly, pet names are also a thing in Mandarin.
No, Latte, he doesn't mean your name.
I mean, of course, what you might call your partner instead of their given name. In English, we usually use dear, honey, or maybe even the skin-crawl-inducing snookums as pet names. In Mandarin, more common pet names include 亲爱的宝宝 or 老公 or 老婆, especially among unmarried couples. I feel like as soon as you get married, 老公 and 老婆 are less pet names and more familial titles. However, in Mandarin, you might also hear some very unique pet names, which might also be, frankly, pretty insulting. For example, 小胖猪, 小懒鬼, 猪头, or 狗贼. I guess those fulfill the requirement of pet names because if anyone other than your partner called you that, it would probably be Hans right away. I'm curious though, do you use pet names with your partner? And if so, what pet names do you do? That could be in either English, Mandarin, or any other language that you speak. Let us know in the comments below.
Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. And if you want to see more in the future, please hit the subscribe button. We'll hope to catch you in the next one. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.